Our bodies treat loneliness the same way they treat physical pain. The same alarm systems, the same urgency, the same insistence that something needs to change. There's actually research on this. The neural pathways that light up when you are socially excluded overlap significantly with the ones that activate when you're physically hurt. Your brain, at the level of pure biology, doesn't distinguish cleanly between, say, a broken bone and being left out, between injury and isolation. In both contexts, the threat feels real. So this means that loneliness isn't a weakness, and it isn't evidence that you're too needy or too sensitive or not self-sufficient enough. It's a signal, and one that your body generates with the same seriousness it reserves for genuine threat. The problem is we've built an entire culture around suppressing that signal rather than responding to it. We've learnt to be extraordinarily good at performing fine, at staying busy enough that it doesn't quite catch up, or at scrolling or working or everything just at the surface with people even that we've known for years, because going deeper feels like a risk that we're not sure we can afford. And so that signal keeps firing, and we keep overriding it. And the gap between how connected we look and how connected we actually feel gets wider quietly over time. And today I want to talk about what it actually means to answer that signal, not with more people or more plans or more presence on your phone, but with something older than any of that, something that communities who live the longest and report the deepest sense of belonging have been doing, often without naming it, for generations. If you're new here, welcome. I'm Cyndi Darnell, sex and relationship therapist who works with all kinds of people in all kinds of relationships all over the world. On this channel, we have the conversations that most people have in their heads, but not out loud, about pleasure, desire, intimacy, connection, relationships, grief, loss, attachment, attunement, community, and what gets in the way. If that's what you're here for, you're absolutely in the right place. So let's get into it. Loneliness is one of the most stigmatized experiences a person can have, which is a cruel irony because it's also one of the most universal. We treat it like it's a personal deficiency. Like if you were more interesting or more lovable or more socially adept, you wouldn't be sitting in it. But loneliness isn't a verdict on who you are. It's a signal the same way that physical pain is a signal. Your nervous system registering that something important is missing. And what's missing isn't just people. It's a specific quality of contact, that feeling of being seen, of being heard, of mattering to someone in a way that isn't transactional. And that distinction matters because for a lot of us, we've tried to solve loneliness by adding more people, adding more plans, or more stimulation, and still felt utterly hollow at the end of it. Because presence without attunement doesn't touch the thing that's actually aching inside us. The cultures and communities where people report the highest levels of well-being, not just longevity, but actually a felt sense of belonging, aren't actually doing anything particularly dramatic. They're not hosting grand events every week or making millions or optimizing their way to success. They're eating together, slowly. They're walking the same route at the same time. They're sitting with the same people, week after week, in ordinary rooms doing really ordinary things. And what they've built, often without naming it, is something that I would call an anchor. A repeated point of return that says you belong and will keep showing up to prove it. Now, the research on this is consistent, and honestly, it's a little humbling because we tend to overinvest in the quality of a single experience and underinvest in the reliability of recurring ones. We think of connection as something that we find, a revelation, a perfect dinner party, or a moment of unexpected depth with a stranger on a train. And these experiences are important too, but that's not where belonging actually lives. The word ritual tends to conjure up something ceremonial, robes, candles, incense, something with stakes. But what I mean by ritual is much simpler and much closer to your actual life. Ritual is a repeated action held with intention. And that's it. 2 ingredients. And together, they do something that neither does alone. Repeated action without intention is just habit. Automatic, invisible, and easy to erode. Intention without repetition is just a lovely idea that never really takes root. But when you combine them, something shifts. The practice becomes a container, a place our nervous systems learn to recognize as safe. And this is why ritual works, not just in the easy times, but especially in the hard ones. When a storm hits, grief, illness, rupture, that particular grey exhaustion of a life that just isn't going the way you planned, and you don't have the bandwidth to build new structures. You need something that's already standing. You need somewhere to return to. I'm going to tell you a story about Elena. She had one of those lives that looked, from most angles, like it was going well. A good job, a circle of friends, living in a city that she liked, but underneath it all she carried a persistent, low-grade sense of disconnection. The feeling of being near people without ever quite landing with them. And so when her mother died unexpectedly, something cracked open. And grief will do that. It'll strip away the social performances we've mistaken for closeness and leaves really only what's real. So in the weeks after the funeral, her neighbor, a woman in her 70s, who Elena had had pleasantries with for years but never really known, knocked on her door one morning with 2 cups of coffee. Not to talk about the grief, not to fix anything, just coffee. Handed over the threshold with no fanfare. Elena assumed it was a one-time kindness, but the neighbor came back the next morning, and the one after that, and eventually started sitting on Elena's front steps together, 20 minutes, sometimes 30, before the day started properly. And mostly, they just talked about small things. The weather, a book, a terrible reality show, and occasionally, something real surfaced, but not always. And that wasn't the point either. But what Elena noticed months later was that these mornings became the thing she organized herself around. Not because the conversations were extraordinary, but because her neighbor kept coming back. The repetition itself was the message. You exist, you matter, and I'll be here tomorrow. So by the time Elena felt ready to re-engage with the rest of her life, she realized she hadn't survived the grief by being strong. She'd survived it because she had somewhere to return to every morning while she wasn't feeling strong. And that's what an anchor does. So you don't need to engineer something elaborate. You probably already have the raw material. A standing phone call with a sibling or a friend, or a walk that you take with the same person every week. A Sunday morning that belongs to the same 2 or 3 people, reliably without a special occasion to justify it. The question isn't what new thing can you add. It's what's an existing thing that you can honor, that you can show up to with enough consistency and enough presence that it starts to carry weight. And this matters in intimate relationships just as much as it does in friendships and communities. Couples often come to see me focused on the big gestures, the weekends away, the grand conversations, the repair after a major rupture. And those things have their place, of course they do. But what holds a relationship together across the years isn't the peak experiences. It's the small repeated acts of turning towards each other. A ritual as simple as asking, genuinely, how the other person's day was. And then actually listening. And this is critical. Ritual doesn't have to be sacred to be sustaining. It just has to be consistent. And it has to be held with enough care that the other person and you can both feel it. Loneliness is telling us something we need to hear. Not that we're broken, and not that we need more people. It's telling us that something about how we're living has drifted away from the kind of contact that genuinely nourishes us. And so the antidote isn't novelty. Actually, it's return. Find your ritual, protect it, show up to it in the boring weeks and the beautiful ones. And especially in the weeks when everything feels like it's coming up. That's your anchor. And when the storms come, and they will come, you'll know exactly where to go. If this has landed for you, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Send it to the person you want your ritual to be with. And like and subscribe if you haven't already. These are the kinds of conversations I'm coming back to every week, again and again. Because this stuff isn't simple, and I don't think it should be, but I do think it's worth staying with. If you want to keep going, there are a few ways that we can do that. Head on over to my website, cyndidarnell.com, where you'll find a ton of ways to work with me, including one-on-one counseling and coaching, online, no matter where you are in the world, my online courses, and other interesting content there for you to read and to think about. All the details are linked in the description below. Thanks for spending time here with me today, and I'll see you next time.